Do you think we can come back for about another 20 minutes of a session?
Well, because of the amount of money you're paying me, sure. I'm I, I'm open to that. Uh,
Welcome, my dear friends. It's fantastic to see you. In case we haven't been introduced before, I'm Stephen Clements, a writer, a gamer, and an appreciator of big brain activities in general. On this channel, I perform dramatic story readings, I provide role-playing game and movie reviews, and I get to talk to interesting people. And in this episode, we're tackling two of those topics because we're talking to an interesting person who had an important mark on the history of role-playing games, and that is none other than Merle Rasmussen, creator of the first espionage role-playing game, Top Secret, back in the day for TSR. Merle has created other games, and we talk about those in the interview, but Top Secret is enjoying something of a renaissance these days because there is always a hardcore group of people who never gave up on the game, and it's been revitalized in a new edition that Merle helped make, along with dear friend Alan Hammock. So in addition to talk about games and his relationships with notable game designers, in this interview we also get the benefit of learning from a man with decades of corporate American experience, because we all kind of need jobs, so it might be helpful to learn from someone who had a long run of that, who has been quite successful in his personal life as well, because life lessons are important to help us live our own lives better. And it feeds into what I like to focus on in these interviews. What else is there to know about the person beyond the game that has their name on it? And while I'd known about Merle for decades and been intrigued by his work, I hadn't actually got to meet the man until I started going to role-playing game conventions, and at North Texas 2024, I finally got my druthers and a seat at his game, which I covered in the North Texas Con Report of 2024 in quite a bit of detail. It was a highly entertaining game. I suggest you go check that out. And it was there that I was able to entreat upon Merle's more generous character and beg him for an interview, which he graciously provided. I know I enjoyed it, and I hope you enjoy it too. So past me and Merle, take it away. My dear friends, welcome to the show. Merle Rasmussen, legendary creator of the very first espionage role-playing game and the gold standard by which all others are judged to this day. So, Merle, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Stephen.
So, the reason that this conversation is even happening is because at North Texas Con 2024, I had the good luck, both schedule-wise and opportunity-wise, to play in one of Merle's games. He was doing a Hacknoya test session. Was that a play test?
We were playtesting Hacknoya, which is unpublished work. We hope to have it out in the near future. But basically, it's Jolly Blackburn's spoof of Top Secret. So it's comedy rules for espionage. And you were a guinea pig getting to play test at a convention. So far, so good.
And I loved playing in it as all the early issues of Knights of the Dinner Table where they brought up Hacknoya for the first time. I loved those episodes. They were hysterical. It was a small dream come true to actually get to play Hacknoya in person with the inspiration for the entire genre of the game itself. And so my dear friends out there, Merle recently did an interview with Shane Stacks on his channel, and they go over a lot more game related material than what we're going to go over in this interview. Now we are going to talk about games because I'm a gamer, he's a gamer. Obviously, we're going to talk about games, but we're going to focus more on what else Merle Rasmussen has been about. What's his life been? What can we learn from him? So I do recommend you check out Shane Stacks at some point. It was probably the best interview he's ever done. So credit to his guest right there. And
In fact, Shane, it was episode, what was it? Episode, I don't have the number on it. It's an interview on Shane Play Geek Talk blog, RPG designer Merle M. Rasmussen, the man in the tux. Recorded it August 14th. And I missed which episode it is, but it's 200 plus.
And the document that Merle just pulled up, was that your resume?
Yes, this 12-page resume is I help to prepare my interviewers so they have intelligent questions to ask. And then in your case, 1.5 pages of questions that I tried to prepare myself. So mentally, I know what you're asking me, have an idea of what to say, so I didn't go blank. But it was also mutual. It helps us to communicate, and I won't fall asleep on you.
Oh, sure. And when we do these interviews, I want to make the best use of your time, my time, and the viewer's time. So the kind of preparation that Merle has done, sending out a resume with possible talking points and points of interest. That is the first guest I've ever had that did such a thing, and that he just showed us his handwritten notes in response to the questions I send out to help prep my guests. Shows that this guy's attention to detail is pretty darn impressive. You're not going to get one over on him easy, I can tell.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I don't do many interviews. Usually people talk to me in the hallway at a convention, and we talk about doing an interview. It just happened this year. Two guys at the same convention wanted to interview me. So I said, okay. Of course, with Shane, it was all audio. With you, I have Zoom. This is a vlog, so I've been told. And so this may be one of my first vlogs ever.
You bring up an interesting point. Why don't you have more interviews out there? Because I could find a few, but for such an influential like designer, why is there not more Merle?
Part of it's my brand, espionage. It's my shtick. In other words, if I go to a convention and I'm dressed in blue jeans and a t-shirt, nobody knows who I am. The minute I put on a tuxedo with a black bow tie and a Hamburg, this kind of hat, people immediately recognize me. So there's a certain amount of, I like my privacy. And for 30 years, I did not attend conventions. TSR downsized me and 49 other people one day. 30 years went by, and almost to the day, I was invited back as a special guest to GaryCon. Almost to the day, 30 years later. So there was a hiatus. And so that's why you're only seeing me in the last, since 2014, the last 10, 11 years, I'm back. And for those of you that care, I recently was downsized a second time from my employer. And so I have more free time. Some people may have heard of a 40-hour work week. I was expected to put in a 45-hour work week at my last employer. And your energy is focused on making a living, and gaming is a hobby. Let's put it that way. I am considered a professional game designer, but I don't make my living at it. Let's put it that way. It's more of a hobby for me.
And that was one of the things that jumped out to me from your resume was you start listing your RPG convention life at 2014, but I know you've been involved in games for much longer than that. So I was wondering, did you just start by noting which ones you were a special guest at? But no, you took a complete break for 30 years, like
Yes.
no RPG cons?
I looked back at my own listing here, and I was at Micron in Omaha in 1980 as a guest. Micron in 1980, Omaha. And then the next one, it's called Omicron 8, Omaha's oldest, biggest, and best pro space science fiction and gaming con in 1988. So there was an 8-year gap between those two conventions in my own backyard, so to speak. And then I was at a VillaCon in Northwest Missouri State University campus in 88. Then again, I was in Omicron 9 in 89. And then I kind of slowed down and skipped till about 2014. Not that I have agoraphobia, but Top Secret, the original game, stopped selling in about 87. TSR offered to buy the rights from me for a year's worth of royalties, and it was hard to say no. So I had to go find a job in the real world, and going to game conventions, I had a love-hate relationship with TSR. And so I may have done some writing for them, but going to a convention at someone else's expense, I didn't go when it was my expense. Usually if it's someone else's expenses, I'd show up. You might find it interesting. I was a stretch goal for a convention in Wichita, Kansas. They wanted to know if I'd come to the convention, what did I need to come to the convention? So I told them how much it would cost in hotel expense and driving gas expense and food. And I gave them a dollar figure. And they said, so if we sell this many tickets, you'll come to the convention? I said, well, yeah, that's a deal. And they did. They sold me as a stretch goal, and I showed up, and they paid to have me there. And I've been to Wichita, Kansas twice for, I want to call it Tsunami Con, is what their convention was. So I don't always go to the national conventions. I may go to a regional convention, especially if it's in Iowa or Kansas or driving distance. Wisconsin seems to be where I spend a lot of my time for conventions.
Yeah, that Midwest area, it's rife with conventions. It has to do, I suppose, in part with all the TSR alumni that are still around there. So you have local resources for the alumni to even have special guests for a con. And if a lot of folks live in the area, you don't have to do anything too fancy about it. But in other parts of the country, it's a RPG con wasteland as far as the eye can see. But yeah, no, that area is a target rich environment. So I understand why you go to Wisconsin a lot. Heck, I'm thinking about going back to Wisconsin next year for EggCon, go hang out there. And so, which cons do you go to each year these days? And whether as a special guest or on your own? And what are your thoughts on each one of them?
Well, rarely do I go on my own. Generally, I only go if I'm invited. And that means somebody's putting me up in a hotel and paying my travel expenses, which is very generous. Gary Con, being in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, probably the most generous to me for several years, and it's been very good. I've done other interviews there, been on video, met a lot of people. People shake my hand and introduce me to their children. It's oh, I also, besides playing games for 4 hours each day, I get to be in a signature booth, autograph booth. And people, of course, will bring me a game and have me autograph it. And one year, somebody brought me a gamer's ashes and asked me to bless them. So Gary Kahn is very generous and very strong believers in tabletop role-playing games. Very fun in that respect. I also attend North Texas Role-Playing Game Convention in Irving, Texas. Very comfortable, very high ratio between designers and gamers. I think they were limiting it to 500 or 800 people in the past year. They just filled the place with yeah, like with you.
500. Yeah.
500 was the number.
Yeah.
Much more intimate setting. You run into somebody in the hallway and you have a conversation. It's a lower key. It's Texas, so things run maybe a little smoother. At least I find it to be. It's well run. Probably the best run has been Gamehole Con in Madison, Wisconsin. Very well organized. The guy running it is a lawyer, and so he's very concerned about everything being correct. Gamehole Con, they have an evening beforehand for the celebrities to get together at a bar owned by the same organizer. Gamehole Con doesn't compete. Gary Con starts the season and Gamehole Con ends the season. It's mid-October. So you're going from March to October. I've tried some conventions in Massachusetts in February is not good for me.
Total
Uh,
con.
yeah, total
I
con.
went this year and
Well,
it was a good time.
it was a wonderful convention, but the weather never agreed with me. And I slept at least one night at Chicago O'Hare waiting for my flight to continue the next morning because of the bad weather. For those of you that don't know, it snows in the upper United States in February. So those of you that live in the panhandle of Florida don't know what snow is, but some of us actually live where there's snow, and I've been followed by blizzards all the way to Massachusetts. And after you've done that 3 times, it's about time to give it a rest.
Hey, I did live in New Hampshire for 4 years, so I'm used to the 6 months at least of winter.
Yeah.
And you just really have to get acquainted with the snow and like it or not. But I tell you what, my first winter up in Manchester, New Hampshire, when I was clearing out my driveway, I suddenly realized why all these people snowbird like every year. Tons of them just ditch out of there, go down to Florida because my back was telling me, I know why they leave. But Iowa, y'all get lots of winter there too, right?
We also get wind chill, dangerous wind. And literally, they'll say, well, it's 0 degrees today, but it's got a -40 wind chill. That's what it feels like when the wind hits you in the face. So it's dangerous wind chills. It's on our weather reports. Dangerous wind chills today. If your car stalls on the road, you want to have survival equipment with you. That's how dangerous it can be in Iowa. Maybe not so deep a snow like northern Wisconsin, northern Minnesota, but rather the cold piercing wind will frost your pumpkin. It's not good. It's
And it's that kind of thing that makes me ask the question, why would someone live up here? Like, why would you intentionally put yourself through this? It's like, it's not hospitable. And see, yeah, see,
yeah,
you're
yeah.
putting on your Florida attire. Like you could
Okay.
just go out to the beach with me.
Yes, well, I've recently found how comfortable it is to wear this outfit. Even in Iowa, a lot of the old guys, we put on our Hawaiian shirts about March 1st and wear them till about October 1st. We do have sunlight too. We even have the opposite of wind chill days. We have such sunshine out here that it feels like much hotter than it really is due to the humidity. Now, this weather is wonderful for growing crops like corn and soybeans. Not so wonderful for people who live here. So you have to be used to it. I also laugh about Dave Arneson was from St. Paul, Minnesota. Gary Gygax was from Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. There are several of us designers went through the state of Iowa at some point in our lives. Steve Winter, Zeb Cook, Merle Rasmussen. We had time in Iowa. So I think there's something to the climate that helped. We had to be indoors, spent a lot of time with friends indoors gaming. Grew up, especially high school, college, a lot of time spent indoors. So that might influence why there are designers from this area and more conventions, more game shops. Somebody was just telling me game shops all over the place here in the upper Midwest. And people, I mean, they're making a living selling board games as well as role-playing games. So the funny is, I'll go to a convention, and for each mission that we run, I will have a different costume or a different hat. And now you're seeing me wearing a Hawaiian, although there are no flamingos in Hawaii, but the point is a tropical shirt and a straw hat as part of my shtick. People understand I'm in a setting in a top secret mission. Oh, it must be taking place in someplace warm. Alan Hammock took exception that all my missions were equatorial. All my missions were taking place in a warm part of the world. And so, in response to that, I did a mission we now play called London Blitz, and it's all urban. Urban, not tropical, very high proportion of cameras watching you at every intersection, so you can't just do what you want.
That's
So,
London.
London Blitz has become a very popular module that we play at conventions. People love it. And if you didn't know this, I build a centerpiece, usually in the map, with Lego. Why Lego blocks? Well, I build a centerpiece, then tell the gamers what's going to happen in the mission. They build the surrounding terrain as a 3D map, and your agent is one stud high. In other words, one little piece of Lego is the size of your agent. They build a section of the city, and London was a good example. Could be any time from the Bronze Age to modern times is okay to build. The 3D map built of Lego lends itself to scale. The distance between the studs is 10 feet. Each layer of a Lego block is 10 feet. Perfect for line of sight and colorful. People take pictures of it, send it to their friends. It attracts people at the convention. So I've introduced Lego blocks into all my missions at conventions. People even bring people into the room to see and photograph what everybody's built. I also ask the players to describe what's their section of this city or this fortress or this castle or this Renaissance fair or whatever they're building. And it's almost like a backstory, and they've built something and now they're telling that part backstory. And it's very effective. People own part of the game when they're playing it. Their little Agent Orange that's only one stud tall.
Yeah, I reviewed that with high praise in my North Texas Con report for this year because the tools you had to increase immersion by the players and buy in to the adventure, I thought were very innovative. Now, I've been to maybe what, like 9, 10 or something like that role-playing game convention. So maybe somebody else has done something like this. It's the first time I've seen it. Do you know if anybody else uses the techniques that you use at cons?
I heard years ago somebody played with Lego. I've been told it's rather juvenile, and yet I can get people of all ages to take 20 minutes of their 4-hour session and build something out of Lego. Very seldom do I have anybody griping about it. The other thing I do, especially useful with younger players, I bring props to the game. In other words, I will bring a miniature camera and I will hand it randomly to the different players, or a telescope, or a listening device. And they're all toys. A little telescope, a little compass ring, one of the favorite ones is a satellite uplink disguised as a lip gloss applicator. Found it in a gift store, bought them out, and I have players ask for that because they want to have their lip gloss applicator satellite uplink. Now, all this silliness, really, you can use this device during the mission, and then you take it home with you as a souvenir. You played Top Secret with Merle Rasmussen. The other thing I do, if I do a handout, I have handout after handout with lots of detail, pre-generated characters. Mr. Rasmussen, can we write on this? Yes, that character sheet is a souvenir. You may take it with you. And often at the end of the session, which usually is 3 hours and 45 minutes, I autograph the character record sheets, and people love it. They have a piece of the game they can take home with them in case they haven't taken a photo already of the game table. You ask me what time it is, I'll tell you how to build a watch. That's Merle. So,
So, for how long have you been doing those kind of immersive techniques?
I would have to say since 2014. In 2014, I showed up at a convention with an oasis, which was a piece of brown felt, which was the Sahara Desert. And it had some little hills underneath made of styrofoam. And people got into the fact that they were minuscule, itty bitty pinpoints out on this vastness of the Sahara Desert. And the next year, I had an oasis built this way. And the next year, I started bringing pre-made pyramids to my desert. They were made of Lego, but they were pyramids. And people started building, instead of me building, like the next convention, they were building the Sphinx, and they were building other fortresses and other things in the desert around my oasis. And so it developed to the point that now everybody builds something to add to the map. I'll give you one. I was doing a crossover. Dungeons and Dragons is 50 years old this year, 2024. So my wife suggested I do crossover events. The D&D Top Secret crossover event, the mission takes place in a medieval castle built of Lego. I built it. And then crown jewels of Upper or Lower Slobovia are on display during a Renaissance fair, and the players get to build all the Renaissance fair around the medieval castle, and they're to guard the jewels that are inside the castle. And that is a crossover. Oh, yes, they also, as secret agents, have to dress in Renaissance clothing, hiding their weapons and gadgets while protecting the jewels inside the castle. Very effective, very much fun. People crash their mini helicopters into the walls of the castle, and all kinds of exciting things happen. But
That's
the
a memory right
Renaissance,
there.
yeah, Renaissance, they build ships, they build places for mermaids to swim around, they build stables for the horses, for the jousting, all the things you could think of at a Renaissance fair, because people know what that is. And right in the middle is the big white crystal castle that I built. It's got 13 guards, and they're wearing bright red outfits, so you can see which ones are the real guards and which are the fake. So it lends itself well. I don't think I've seen anybody else using Lego in the last 11 years. I have not.
And yeah, it really drew all the players at the table I was at in. Like for that 20 minutes, we were quiet, we were focused, we were eager beavering away at what it was. I just wish we had more time so I could get to explore the other people's playing areas, because fortunately we did get to explore most of mine, but I was intrigued by what they had too. So good on you for that. So of the cons you've been to, can you pick out one game that you would point to as this is the most memorable, or this was the most enjoyable game session I've ever had at a con?
Well, I had a player who is playing a secret agent, and they'd stopped an enemy vehicle, and they were trying to get inside of it. I think it was an armored limo. And the player had a secret agent. They didn't want to kill the guy inside. They wanted to capture him and exchange a briefcase with him. Well, he'd locked all the doors, and they couldn't get to him. So this agent tries to smash the windshield. and he's rolling the dice, rolling the dice. It won't open. He can't get the windshield smashed open. And the bad guys are beginning to shoot from buildings around him. And the player literally said, I'm getting anxious about this. I'm getting nervous. I don't know how to go on. I said, it's only a game. You're doing very well. The dice are just rolling against you. And this is an adult male that was upset because of the realism of the setting. He felt he was there and he was panicking because he couldn't achieve his mission. Now, having said that, one of the best experiences I ever had, I was stopped at GaryCon by a man. He thanked me for creating the top secret role-playing game. He was a Gulf War veteran. He had been spending time with PTSD in a Texas hospital, and they were recreating battle situations they had been in reality using the top secret combat system, and the other veterans with PTSD were validating the decisions that this man had made in the combat situation. This validation was extremely valuable to everybody at the table dealing with PTSD. You've done the right thing. I'd never considered Top Secret to be a therapeutic device. I have heard of police departments training their officers using the Top Secret rules. They're training the police officers in hostage negotiating, and they're using my rules to do it. That kind of, the veteran gave me shivers. And of course, I thanked him for his service. I hear from people in the military that a guy was in military school, and that's what they played. They played Dungeons and Dragons and Top Secret in military school. He then went on to go to seminary to become a minister, and they were playing Top Secret in the seminary. Same guy. It was very funny. And just recently, he told me, Merle, you don't know how much Top Secret affected the lives of people in the military. And I thought that was very interesting. I was telling my wife, and she said, well, you're an influencer. I said, I never thought of myself as an influencer. And recently met a man who was talking about Top Secret, and he said, Top Secret? Oh, yeah, I was at a military in Arkansas, a big camp in Arkansas, and we had B-52 bombers 90 feet underground, and in our off hours, we would play Top Secret. And we played with the officers, and officers and enlisted men would play the game together, but they couldn't pull rank during the game. I thought it was a brilliant idea. And I hear these stories about people on board bombers circling the Soviet Union, and in their off time, they play Top Secret. Or they'd be under the ice in a submarine under the polar ice cap, and they played Top Secret where the missiles are inside the submarine.
So that sounds like two very positive outcomes of your design work. One, the game you're running, the guy who was about to have a nervous breakdown because he was so into the game, that means your storytelling capability is enviable. So good on you for that. If you can induce a panic attack because your game is so intense, that says something. Because I come from the DM school of hard knocks. And two, that you're able to make such a difference for the positive in some traumatized people's lives. That's fantastic, because one of the principles of therapy is to safely move someone to confront the problem and in a safe way, give them the space to respond to it and resolve it. That's fantastic, man. That's great to hear.
Well, thank you for that vote of confidence, but I'm no doctor. I'm no freak.
Well, you don't have to be. A good storyteller can heal a lot of wounds.
This is my tuxedo t-shirt, and people love it. I'll wear it the first few days of the convention, and then on Saturdays, I will wear a real tuxedo with a real black bow tie, and sometimes dish the hat because it's felt and it gets rather warm. But this is the look, and the people that run around conventions dressed as wizards and orcs, they take notice because I'm the only guy wearing a tuxedo at a major tabletop role-playing game convention, and it works. Gamers did this. I showed up at a table at GaryCon, and a man shows up in a business suit, and a woman showed up in a formal dress. I said, what are you doing? They said, we're here to play Top Secret. From that time on, I went, okay, if the players are stepping up, I've got to step up and dress the part. The other thing you cannot buy is a top secret New World Order ball cap, trucker's hat, or whatever they call them. And people have wanted to buy these, and sorry, not available, just to the administrator and close friends. Years ago, I think it was 2014, went to a game convention wearing my TSR RPGA hat, decorated with all kinds of pins and memorabilia, and it's ugly. And people said, I can't believe somebody's wearing an RPGA, Role-Playing Game Association hat to GaryCon. The hat is a collector's item. The hat has pictures and buttons and all kinds of trivia. Napoleon Solo license plate, and I've even got my RPGA membership card, and I'm number 7. Yes, not 007, but I'm member 7 of the TSR's RPGA network. That's some of the perks from being an old game designer. People send you and give you things, and it's wonderful. It builds my ego almost more than being interviewed.
Well, I can relate to the RPGA thing because while my membership number, there was no chance it's that low. It did exist because I've still got all my old polyhedron magazines sitting there with my Dragon and Dungeons, and those were good. I enjoyed them.
Yeah, I mentioned a mission in London, London Blitz, and this was a prop. And if one of the players wanted to be a London Bobby, they got the hat for 4 hours. And I had people wearing this wool hat for 4 hours at a convention. And then as a player, as a character, they would stop traffic and blow their little whistle and carry their little nightstick. And people role played, they got it. They understood, oh, I'm a London Bobby. Here's how they act. Having never seen a real London Bobby, you know, but as a secret agent, I might note this. I mentioned it, but I don't know how strong people get it. Top Secret was the first game where you play a character, you're playing a secret agent, but he's playing a character. So you're playing a character who plays a character. I can't think of a better way to describe that. But yeah, you are a investigator playing the part of a London Bobby. So it's 2 layers of role playing. And it was
Bit
the first,
meta.
yeah, the first role playing game I knew of that had ever done that. And it took me 35, 40 years to discover that. For your information. Yes.
So way back in the day, you created the game Top Secret and got it sold to TSR, and they had some success with that. And then they hired you on, which was great. I mean, obviously you had some designing chops. Why not take more advantage of this guy? And then they stick you with Dungeons and Dragons and only a little bit with Top Secret. Why? What was the thinking behind that? Let's get the Top Secret guy and make him come up with basic D&D adventures. Why not just have you full-time, top secret, 24/7?
Well, I asked Alan Hammock. He was my editor, and then he was my supervisor, and then he was my editor again. The same question. He said, we were all directed to work on advanced D&D or D&D. Now, keep in mind that Gary Gygax was doing a lot of his own design work. At the same time, there was a design department. We had to come up with so many fresh ideas, and then it was sent to the president of the company to choose which ones would be produced. Well, gee, Mr. Gygax often had his published even before some of us new employees had ours. But one of my first was B Solo, which is Ghost of Lion Castle. And then they said, Merle, you need to do Lathan's Gold, which is X Solo. And then somewhere along the line, I did X9, The Savage Coast. And I didn't bring it with me today, but there is a Midnight on Dagger Alley, which was an advanced D&D solo module. And I was teaching myself D&D and AD&D to write these modules. That's the funny. The other funny is TSR had an arrangement with book companies, and I'm trying to remember the name of a book company back then, but say
Random
it's,
House?
yeah, like Random House, you get the idea. And they would literally sell the titles, and they could put them in the Random House catalog before we had written the product. So I was told, hey, Merle, we need a first through third level basic solo adventure, and it's got to be called Ghost of Lion Castle. And 32 pages, go, write it. And so I would spend 8 weeks producing B solo, 32 pages. And they said, that's a great job, Merle. Now we want you to do X solo. Now do this in 7 weeks. Okay,
Yeah.
same 32 pages, do it in 7 weeks. And as they came along, always more, it's like be funny on command. You did so well, do it again, do it quicker.
Ugh.
And that was the reality of TSR. I did have Ace of Clubs, which is a top secret module, but it took years to get it finally published. I don't know if anybody's looked at the copyrights on that, but Ace of Clubs took a long time to come to publication, even though I was at the company at the time. Dungeons and Dragons, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, took priority over Boot Hill, Gamma World, Top Secret, Gangbusters. I will tell you that Top Secret sold 214,000 plus copies in the 7 years it was on the market. Well, then they bought the rights from me and they assigned Doug Niles to write a new espionage role-playing game called Top Secret SI, Special Investigations. He didn't know for 30 years I'd sold my rights. He thought he was stepping on my toes. I said no, and he went, phew, oh man. Anyway, he felt guilty for like 30 years. And I said, no, I really did sell my rights. Go ahead. So his game stayed on the market for quite a while. Top Secret SI had quite a few modules, mission modules. And then it was off the market, and I was approached by an outside company to produce Top Secret New World Order. And that is what was published, in 2017? I'm trying to remember the exact date, but it had these are the rules, and the box came out and looked like this. So everything you need was in this box, and just the rules and the module were in the book.
Played
Right?
that at Total Con, had a great time in Istanbul, and it was a pretty good representation of the city because both the guy running it and myself, we've spent some time there. That was a welcome little trip down memory lane, even if it involved way more murder and assassination and betrayal than my visits to Turkey have done. But so Top Secret, with it sounds like nowhere near the corporate emphasis, and so marketing and support still sold a respectable amount of copies under TSR. Do you have any idea why espionage RPGs just haven't been as popular as fantasy RPGs? Is it the corporate lack of sense in pushing it, or what do you think?
Couple funny things. I got your question, and my first response is, well, why have fantasy movies never been as popular as espionage role-playing games?
Yes. Why?
Espionage movies. Different market. The public is interested in James Bond. They're not so interested in fantasy, swords and sorcery stuff. A funny side to that, every time there was a James Bond film, my sales went up. And Jim Ward drew my attention to that. He said, when are they going to do a post-apocalyptic movie so it will increase the sale of Gamma World? And so he and I had a friendly rivalry going on because our sales numbers were the same, similar quarterly. To give you an idea what was going on, I was hired as the TSR was peaking, and then I was let go with 49 other people as they were declining. So I was there at the peak of TSR. Top Secret sold a tenth as well as basic D&D and 100th as well as advanced D&D. So if that's where your sales are, you chase the sales. Obviously, today we look at 50 years back, Dungeons and Dragons is a household word. They even have postage stamps now for Dungeons and Dragons. That's pretty good penetration into the mass market. Top Secret was never going to make it into the mass market. Pretty slim demographic who was playing it. One thing I did find out was that the demographic used to be all men, all teenage to middle-aged men with disposable income and disposable time. Okay. Then I started doing conventions, and I even started doing all women events. And I had women signing up to play Top Secret, and they loved it. It appealed to their sense of role playing, and they often would play a male character. Well, I also have males who play female characters. So the very issue is this is make believe in a box. I'm not going to tell people, no, you can't play a gender that's not your type. If that's their role playing thing, that's fine with me. As you may have noticed, there are female and male secret agents. That's sort of a big deal. In fact, I recently wrote some rules for Hacknoia that had a character. There's the swallows and I can't remember the ravens. And I said, are you really going to put that in the game? And they said, yeah, that's pretty good because they have special abilities controlling other agents, making them do what they want. Uh, Pardon me while I bring in my next prop. Yes, stroking my little kitty here.
Oh, who is this?
Well, this one happens to be named Scott, and great Scott. The name came with him, but he won't leave me alone now that he knows you're on the screen. So,
Oh,
no,
that's fine. I love kitty cats. That's bonus points.
there he
Hi,
is.
Scott. Oh,
He's
he a tubby
fine.
orange boy. Oh, that's great. I love it.
He
He's
wouldn't leave me alone.
He's quite welcome. But you raise a good point about a lot of women have different preferences in what they do versus men with their free time, right? But like the vampire game has been able to tap into that. So if you go to a vampire game, usually like half of the gaming group is going to be female, whereas D&D, what in my experience, it's still mostly male. And so Top Secret, I guess that's one of the things that TSR back in the day, there's no way they would have looked at that as, well, this is a growth opportunity we could do, because Vampire hadn't come out yet, hadn't shown them how that you can get women involved in role-playing games and more talky social things, which Top Secret very much is. You do get to kick down doors and kill people, but that's usually little bits in a broader adventure. Whereas in D&D, it's pretty customary. That's what you do, like room to room while you're searching a dungeon. So, okay. So it was just a little bit of
Well, I've
publisher
run
blindness.
I've run the same missions with men and with women only. And men tend to be much more violent shopping. So I don't have shopping in my missions anymore because they'll spend 2 hours shopping. And one time the women's group said, we're buying swimwear. And I said, why are you buying swimwear? Well, we're not going to be on the mission the whole time. So that spoke to me as to what was important to the players. They got to shop, they were going to go buy swimwear. There were some funnies. Along with that, I had a Jeep stopped and it's surrounded by monkeys with 1-inch fangs. What do? One lands on your roof. Men shoot through the roof, get rid of the monkey. Women crank down the window, throw out a granola bar. The monkey jumps down to the ground. All the monkeys run over to get the granola bar, and the woman can continue driving. Now, different thought processes. I'm not saying one is, I'll just say they're different thought processes of the same problem. And I enjoy it. In fact, I have women who come to GaryCon to play Top Secret. That is their thing at the convention. They like it the most. That has been rewarding to me.
It's a good game, and it's a
So
change of pace from your dungeon crawlers and more traditional fantasy games. And that's one of the strengths of a role-playing game convention, is getting to try out things that you don't normally play, things you might not have been exposed to before. Because some of my new favorite games, like even I like them more than I like Dungeons and Dragons, have been those little oddball games that pop up at a convention. Like On Guard that Steve Winter was running at GaryCon 2019. I got into that session and then I thought, where's this been my whole life? Because I just love that game. And so you've worked for multiple publishers, mostly in a freelance capacity from what I'm tracking, but beyond TSR, Frog God Games, Kinzer and Company, West End Games, White Wolf, at least a little bit, Solarian, and some others. Did these companies have noticeably different corporate cultures? If they did, what were they like to you?
well, I will tell you, most of my experience has been with TSR. I generally design what I like, and then I go find a publisher that will send me a contract. I did have a publisher ask me to prepare the royalty contract. So I just took someone else's royalty contract and blacked out the percentage and changed the percentage, and I changed the name of the company and here, sign this. So it worked to my advantage. So some are very unprofessional, non-legal departments. They didn't know. Others will send me a boilerplate. This is what we offer everybody that writes for us. I said, great. One surprise is I wrote an episode module for how to write adventure modules that don't suck for Goodman Games. It sold so well, they sent me a bonus check. They sent bonus checks to all the authors, which was not in our contract. That was unusual to get a bonus check from anybody. I have worked with another company that's been prepaying me to write 1,000 word fantasy adventures. They prepaid me. I said, don't you want to put this on the market, see if it's going to sell? Or is this going against my royalties? They said, no, Merle, this is to keep your interest. Well, extremely unusual to be prepaid. That company, I said, hi, you have my attention. Yes, you have my interest. If they're going to send me money in advance of publication, that was so unusual. I would take the money, but here's your, I did over 100 of these 1,000 word adventures. To this day, it has not been published. So I know. Welcome to my world. I once did a triangular card game called Squirm and sold it all the way to a company in Texas. They decided, and they sent us $1,000 advance on the contract because they were going to buy it, reproduce it, their game. They sent it back at their expense, all existing copies, thousands of copies, and said, keep the $1,000. And we went, okay, thank you. We'll do that. So I've run into business people, and here's the funny. You have artists and you have business people. Not necessarily the same people. I've gone to conventions where I have a new game coming out and no one brought it to the convention to sell. That's not very good business.
No synergy there.
No,
Right.
it's like new game, author is here, game didn't make it to the convention. That bugs you. So I started making sure I bought copies and brought them to the convention. Even if I sold them at a loss, the product would be there with me. So I've dealt with different levels of professionalism. I will tell you that Mr. Goodman said, oh, we don't buy source books. We only buy adventures. And I thought, that's very honest. That was very honest. And he sent me on my way, and someone else published my source book. It happened to be Rasmussen's Planetarium. Goodman Games took a look at it. No, thank you. Sent it on. I sent it on, and Frog God went ahead and published it. It is a print-on-demand source book. It's got about 20 different chapters, but there's more than 20 planets in here. And currently, they're not interested in doing a sequel, which I want to call Merle's Worlds. They don't think there's anybody interested in planet hopping, a role-playing game. I wrote a generic source book. I'm writing Merle's Worlds, seeking a publisher. And right now I'm in negotiations with someone. They want me to not be generic. They want me to tie it in with an existing science fiction game. That's the give and take of my world as a designer. Do you design, do you change it to what the publisher wants or not? That is it's a good question. I did a fantasy adventure based on the bubonic plague of Europe, and the publisher said after I finished it, they asked for it. I wrote it, solo adventure, and they said, Merle, it's too soon after COVID-19. I said, well, that's the point. That was the point, is how people reacted to COVID-19 in our century versus how people responded to the bubonic plague, the dark,
Wait. You tried to do a product tie-in with COVID-19. That's a different way of looking at things, my friend. That's pretty funny.
Well, and it's not on the market right now either. So that tells you I did a list of my unpublished works. It's longer than my list of published works, which you have seen.
Right.
So you toy around with ideas. Some you hit them all at a ballpark, and some you crawl into the dugout and hope nobody noticed. However, you asked me a question about dealing with them. Every company is different. All the personalities are different. Some will say, hey, do you know so and so? Could you get them to write a foreword for your product? Yes, I know them. And so they wrote a foreword for my project. There's interplay between designers. We recognize each other. We admire each other's work. You'll love this. I have fanboys, and some of my fanboys are other game designers. And then I'm a fanboy of their work. And so when we meet at a convention, I'll say, have you seen this? Would you like a copy? And they'll say, well, yes. And here, just a minute, I'm giving you this. This is my new. And so there's fanboy participation going on. That's a lot of fun.
Mutual Admiration Society. Nothing wrong with that.
For years, Steve Jackson and I kept passing in the hallways. Hi, Steve. Hi, Merle. Hi, Steve. Hi, Merle. How's it going? It's fine. We have no ever published anything from each other, but we knew each other professionally, or at least in passing. Now that's when you've been around a while. You meet people and they remember you or feel sorry for you. I'm not sure which it
When
is.
they've seen you at enough cons that they're like, wait, I've seen that face. Who is this guy? I'll at least say hi to be polite. I get you.
Yes. But every company's different. It's all different personalities. I have to understand that my personality may not work with them and theirs may not work with me. They may not be looking for a Black Death of Europe role-playing game, even though I thought it was a great idea. There are things I've been working on that'll never see print. There may not be commercial. I've been working for years on a Stagecoach commerce game, which did get published by Kenzer and Company. I want to do a steamboat commerce game. Not too many people interested in that topic area.
Pretty small niche, but
Yes,
that
very
niche
small.
might like it. So, what's the risks and rewards? You got to weigh them out and decide what you want to do. Now, all the stuff that hasn't been published and you think the chances are fairly low that it might be, can you make that available? I mean, even if you put it on Drive-Thru RPG for like $1 for a download of the PDF.
Well, I appreciate that. Now that I am gainfully semi-retired, you might start seeing some of this. I was joking with Alan Hammock. I said, Alan, you realize you and I could photocopy a set of rules and sell it just because of our names.
Yes.
And he realized it, but he also is semi-retired and he's not interested. He just got back from taking a boat trip down the
The
Rhine River.
Danube, yeah.
And I'm looking at taking a trip to Upper Michigan to see the copper mountains and things up there, which don't exist because we've overmined it. Anyway, the point is, I'm interested in the geology and the animals up there, porcupines and moose, etc. Plus, I'm going to Lake Geneva, not Lake Geneva, I'm going to Madison, Wisconsin, and the next week I'll go to Upper Michigan, Upper Peninsula. So that's my plans right now.
So you're moving around too much to commit to a publishing scheme or enterprise with Alan just yet. Okay, I got you.
Oh, he and I worked so well together. He'd ask for something, I'd give him 300 words. He'd cut it back to 100 by his own admission. So as an editor, he made my work much improved.
And yeah, our mutual friend Alan Hammock, y'all have a history working together. So it's been a positive one the whole time. And since you stopped working at TSR, did y'all stay in touch or is it just y'all reconnected since you started going back to cons?
It's reconnection. I'll tell you, he did edit the new version, Top Secret New World Order. He was the editor of that. So he's on the design team. And we did quite a bit of correspondence then. He and I see each other at conventions. We compare notes on royalties. He was wise enough at one point to get royalties for editing. No one I've ever heard gets royalties for editing, and he did it. He pulled it off, and I get royalties for design, which is what usually happens.
I get
Now,
paid for editing and I haven't heard of royalties for editing. So good on Alan, man.
he's, he's amazing. I mean, it's like, that's pretty good. I will tell you, when we worked at TSR, we were in a old hotel in downtown Lake Geneva, and he hired me over the phone. I went and finally got to his office, and then my office, you had to go through his to get to mine. So I was separated from the rest of the design staff by the boss. So it's rather interesting. He and I got along great. He's a former Eagle Scout. I guess once you're an Eagle Scout, you're always an Eagle Scout. He and I, laid back, easygoing, didn't have problems with each other. I took him, because I was working at TSR, a robotic role-playing game. And I said, I'd like to submit this to TSR. He said, okay. So he takes it and submits it to people to review, and it comes back rejected. No one wants to play a robot. It doesn't go well for role playing. You have no decisions. You're a robot. 6 months later, Alan calls me to his office. He holds up a copy of some other publisher's robotic role playing game.
Mm-hmm.
Merle, you were right. And I can't remember what rivets or something, but it was a robotic role playing game. And I was there 6 months in advance. He and I were shaking our heads. We had it. We had the genie in the bottle, and no one wanted it at TSR. It was rejected by TSR. Now, so those are the kind of anecdotes we have in common. I did see him for 30 years. When we re-met, it was like good old friends. We had established ourselves. He'd tried to start a game shop, got out of the business, went to work for the local government. I had had a series of jobs, one job for 35 and a half years. We'd worked in the private sector. We didn't need the hobby, so to speak. So our values were very right on. We agreed with each other. We're good friends. He continues to travel around the world, and I continue to travel around the Midwest. I've seen most of the United States, and he seems to be traveling farther than I do. Put it that way.
Yeah, man, he's not slowing down either. He was just telling me about, and I'm going to go here this month, and then the month after that, I'm going up here, and he doesn't have enough time for moss to grow on him. However much travel wears him out, he just keeps doing it, comes back and recharges, and then gets back out there. So that's good. That means he's interested. That means he's got things he wants to keep doing. He's staying moving. And like you, it doesn't really matter where you're traveling to. It's that you're still interested in life and still working at something, still looking to add wrinkles to your brain. That's good.
Yeah. In fact, I recently retired, and a guy who had been retired for like 15 years said, you need to keep your mind busy. And it's very, very true. I actually had an episode of, I woke up and tried to remember what day of the week it was. Now, when you're in business, you know immediately what day it is and what you have to do the next day by date. You know the day of the week, you know the date, you know the time of the day. Everything is busy. Business is urgency. As a retired person, I've now gotten a part-time position driving a student to classes at Iowa State University. 49 years after I was a student at Iowa State University, now I'm driving someone. Back then I had a 3-speed bike. Now I have 2 cars. So I've improved my life a little bit, at least monetarily.
So
I
it's just
needed,
one student. It's not like you're taking an Uber gig.
no, I'm only taking one student to and from class 3 days a week. Now, the funny you say that, I spend a lot of time, my wife is responsible for the local food pantry. She's the coordinator, and I'm her voluntold. If she needs something done, I seem to be the one making public appearances, wearing a chef's hat and an apron to talk about the community food pantry. And I do a lot of lifting of heavy cargo and things and hurting my back doing it. But the point is, I'm active to be active, not complain about how unfair the world is. Do something about it. And I seem to be able to find plenty to keep me busy. Yeah, I need to go buy some more things for the next convention. I've lost my prop. I hope to be selling I Choose to Rise. It's an educational card game honoring Black heroes who chose to rise and make a difference. And this came to me out of the blue. A publisher actually approached me, actually, and Middleman came and approached me. He says, Merle, we want to teach children, fourth graders, about Black history. And I said, you do know I'm not Black, I'm Danish American. He said, yeah, but you designed the Save Your Brain card game for fourth graders 10 years ago. And people don't know me for that. They know me for role playing, tabletop role playing games and accessories. But I've done a game called Save Your Brain, and I was teaching fourth graders how to keep from having head injury. This time I'm teaching Black history, and each card, you could play poker, you could play other card games with this deck, but the suits are different, but each card contains information about a Black hero. I was informed that if the African American deck goes well, they might do a Pan-African deck, Black history throughout the world. And I would be the lead batter on that. Then we started talking about other affected groups. Why not Asian Americans? Why not women? Why not gay Americans? You get the idea. Every group has its leaders. America is a place where we have lots of representation, but people don't even know their own history.
Mm-hmm.
And I grew up in a very white environment. I understood white history, and we didn't study much else. It was outside of my wheelhouse. That's what's interesting. I had to expand my thinking, and I needed a fourth grade teacher and a Black person. I was talking to a guy at work. He said, "Oh, yeah, my fiance is a Black fourth grade teacher." I said, "I'm going to hire her to be the editor." Of course,
Smart.
because I don't wish to offend by writing something that you shouldn't. In other words, something offensive. And who better to get the fourth grade reading level? The reason
Yeah.
for that is a lot of people can attain a fourth grade reading level. Some never get more than that. So that's why we're doing this. And I can't tell you how many copies have been sold. I need to go back and check. They sent me a royalty check for 3,000 copies. So usually you get a royalty check after it sells. They sent me the royalties before it started selling. So
Hmm. People keep
yes,
throwing money at you up front.
yeah,
That's a
well,
good trend.
yeah, how shall I put this? No, I don't accept payment in merchandise anymore.
Mm.
Uh, you,
Yeah. Right.
you get the idea.
Yeah.
As a game designer, to School of Hard Knocks, the first triangular card game I published myself, my own money, and it cost me money and two friendships. From then on, I've been using other people's money to publish games, and that seems to work for me. Meaning,
Well,
if it's good enough, they're going to risk their money.
that's good on two fronts because one, if you can sell your idea to them, well, that's a marker of quality. And two, if they're an established publisher, they're already interested in the marketplace. They already have the infrastructure to do what they're supposed to be doing. So why should you one man band it when you can work with someone who has resources to do what you're trying to do? It makes sense to me.
And now I have more time on my hands.
So your remunerative career, that's mostly taken place outside of the role-playing game world, but you've rarely been far from designing games, from game design. How did you balance what looked like relatively frequent game design work with real world, everyday corporate work?
left and right brained. At work, I needed to be accurate and complete. I was in charge of a database. At home, I can be arbitrary and capricious. So the two halves of my brain work that way. I have to get some arbitrary and capricious, do something fantasy, do something in role-playing games, and then to go back to work the next day, actually very boring, accurate and complete every day. So the two halves, I'm using both halves. That's how I tell people it works. You have to
That is good. And
use your
so
whole
that
brain. Yeah.
sounds kind of like a pressure release valve from accurate complete at work to I got to go have fun stuff with my brain by making all these different adventures or game products that I'm coming up with. So you kept yourself awake with your side hustle when the main job wasn't as stimulating. Is that right?
That'd be good. And lately I've been designing alien worlds to escape this world. You could argue that psychologically. So yeah, I'm off creating fantasy worlds, science fiction worlds to keep my brain busy. And it's been very, I won't say therapeutic, but yeah, could be therapeutic. You could say that.
No,
Yeah.
totally so. Totally so. Because my day to day, I get to do quite a bit with my brain, but I do enjoy these creative endeavors outside of work as well. And I really wish that there was more planet hopping material out there because I like it. I'm a big fan of the second edition Spelljammer because you have unlimited vistas you could go check out and different possibilities you can engage in. So I hope somebody picks that up for you.
It's like a radio program we have up here in Iowa. They call people who've been ghosted to find out why. And then the radio people say, well, he's still on the line. I guess we'll ask another question. Anyway, but they try to find out why people were on a date and then one ghosted the other, and it's good entertainment. It's
Yeah,
some
that's what people do these days, at least the younger set, is if they have any conflict with the other person, whether this is a friendly relationship, romantic relationship, whatever it is, they don't know how to deal with it apparently, so they just cut ties. They don't talk it out. They just disappear. Have you noticed that? Do you keep your
well, I
eyes on the pulse of the youth these days?
Of course I do. I'm 67 and I've been had my thumb on the pulse. You're not supposed to take the pulse with your thumb. But anyway, no, I have no idea what the younger generation is doing, except I'm now on campus 3 days a week. And what I noticed, different than when I went to school, everyone is looking at their device, walking down the sidewalk, walking across the crosswalk, looking at their devices, not at each other or traffic. And that's a little scary.
Yeah.
Of course, people on a college campus ignore traffic anyway. They go in large herds of students. One of us will get hit, but not all of us. Anyway,
That's a
I
good
would
point.
I would say even the ancient Greeks were upset with youth because the youth did not stand up when the elders entered the room, and that was 2,000 years ago. So I'm not too worried that our civilization is going to end anytime soon. We've been having the same conversations for at least 2,000 years.
It's a very optimistic take of yours, but I think that there might be a difference because these little devices that you mentioned represent permanent escape hatches to where people who are too addicted to them lose contact with the physical real world around them and don't know how to negotiate it. It makes them depressed, makes them suicidal. They can't form attachments at a much higher rate than previous generations. So all those previous generations were stuck with the world around them.
Yes.
Maybe not the social norms, but this is a very vexing device we have. It's both wondrous and awful at the same time.
Well, I'm caught trying to learn to use. Is this, if you ask me a question, I go to the encyclopedia. My wife said, why don't you Google that? And I went, it never even entered my mind to Google that. So now, as I'm writing, and I'll just make a note of this, ran into John. I've got a couple of his books here. He's a historian. He asked me back in 2014, Mr. Rasmussen, do you have any correspondence from the 1980s? And I said, well, John, I have to go check my basement. I had 9,000 sheets of paper. I'd collected and saved every correspondence to everybody I'd ever written.
That's crazy.
He as a historian, asked me how much I wanted for it. I said, well, let's start the bidding at, I don't know, $1 a sheet, just to see what he'd say. He said, oh no, it's worth a lot more than that, Merle, and started writing me checks. Well, then I found another 1,000 pages in my basement and brought it to him at a different convention. He wrote me a very nice check. So what I'm saying is I wanted my paperwork saved for posterity. The gentleman's name is John Peterson in the MIT Press, and I'm a footnote in game design history. So I'm literally in his books, a couple of his books as a footnote, and appreciate John for doing that to me. But he also paid my wife Jackie for photographs that she took when we lived in Lake Geneva and put them in one of his books. So we really like John, but we adore his money. So that's the that's the story with John Peterson.
Yeah, and how are people going to write the histories in the future if we don't have evidence from the past? Like, yes, paper can burn, but it is a physical item that if an EMP goes off, the paper's still there. Everything on this computer right here, everything on this device, gone. You ain't getting it back either. So I'm a big fan in a lot of ways of a more analog world. It helps ground you back in that physical reality of what we were designed to interact with, not these fantasy pixels that AI is throwing at us and things like that. But call me a Luddite, if you will. I'll be fine with it. But another thing that I wonder about the rarity and value of is that on your resume, you listed a game you made, Luther, The Life and Times of Martin Luther. And you note that you sold one copy to a religious studies instructor at Iowa State University. Is it possible to get a copy of Lutheropoly these days? Because I'm Lutheran. I know my pastor would get a kick out of it. What can you tell me about Lutheropoly?
Well, Lutheropoly, I was asked if I would do this for a comparative religions course. They had games on Roman Catholicism and Mormonism and Episcopalianism, and I bought those, whatever. And there was no Lutheropoly, no Luther game. And so what I did, I produced two sets of rules for this instructor. One, opoly based. Instead of money, it's gold pieces, and you're taking over the little countries of the Holy Roman Empire, converting them to Lutheranism. Okay, and you're making gold pieces doing it. So it's very much like Opoly. Version 2 is the role-playing aspect. You play a character, Luther, Luther's wife, Charles V, Methylangton, I can't even pronounce the name anymore. You play Henry VIII of England. So each player has his own goals. And the center of the board is the Holy Roman Empire in the middle. And so what you're doing is you are converting the Roman Catholic continent to other faiths. And he who meets his goal first, like if you're Henry VIII and you convert your country to Anglicanism, you've won as your player character did. Somebody else could convert it before you get it converted, or there could be a counter Reformation and it goes back to the Roman Catholics, but that version interested me more. I never heard back from the teacher. They paid me, I gave them a copy, no reply back. Don't know if they used it, don't have a clue. The other part of this is you might find it interesting. Faust was also a contemporary of Luther, and in this game, you could literally convert sections of Europe to Satanism. And so
What game
perhaps,
did you make?
oh yeah, that's a very interesting
This is
point.
wild.
Faust lived at the same time as Luther, and he did not, well, let's put it this way. You've heard the stories, he sold his soul. Yeah, the Faustian bargain. If you could do that in the game, it's theoretical you could shift from Roman Catholicism to Satanism in a role-playing, in board game. Now,
Wow.
that's probably out there. You asked if you could buy a copy. Well, Merle Rasmussen owns the copyright. I could possibly produce a copy. The problem is, once people see this broadcast, I'm going to have to go and put it in production and have to make a decision. Do I do the Opoly version, where you're doing gold pieces, or do I do the role-playing version where each player has their own goals? Catherine Luther, Luther's wife, her goal is to collect money. That she was very sensible. Luther would never collect royalties on like music that he wrote. There's a wedding present of 20 gold pieces came in, and Luther wanted to return it to his enemy. And his wife said, no, 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 we need the money. Yeah. So she's very grounded compared to Luther, who is not. Now, in the market, how many of these games do you think would sell in the mass market? Let's see, year one. And let's see, I have a Lutheran minister, he'd probably buy one.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So the market is not a mass market. We can discuss details when we're off the camera. And if
Okay. Well, I'm
you really have,
intrigued by the game and the possibility it could write again. Just maybe, just maybe. Wow.
Well, I'll
Glad I
tell you
asked.
where this came from was at one point I was inspired to write a musical called, what did they call Luther? He was a bad guy. He was a heretic. The Life and Times of Martin Luther, which I thought would make a great name for a musical. It might also make a great name for a board game, just for what it's worth.
I wasn't expecting you to be contemplating writing a musical of Martin Luther.
Well, I was in college and I had the idea. I took a theater class and I took a music class, and I eventually left Iowa State to pursue education elsewhere. And I eventually told a teacher at another institution about my idea. He said, "You should talk to the president of the college about this." I went to the president of that college and he said, "This is too big for our institution. You need to go to a larger Lutheran college to produce your musical." So, yes, I am a pretty face, but not just a pretty face. I have interests. Here's the gall is I have an idea to do a Fiddler on the Roof style musical, but I have no musical talent. Okay? I don't write music. Maybe I could be the guy who writes the words, the librettist or whatever. But it was an idea I had in the old days college, and it translated from working on a musical to doing a board game. So I've studied the topic quite a bit, and that's how my mind works. You work on something till you hit a wall, and then you turn and do work on something else for a while.
Yeah, that makes sense because like I've had this one particular idea floating around in my head for like 17 years. It's an incomplete idea. It was looking for something to land on. And then just within the past few months, I started writing something and that idea said, "This is my time," and went and grafted itself into the story. So I get it. You totally do that. So are you Lutheran? Because there's a lot of Martin Luther going on in your brain.
Yes, I am. And so my grandparents have been Lutheran. So grandparents, parents, me, my siblings chose to leave Lutheranism for personal reasons. I remained in that particular church. To make a long story short, did take religious classes, confirmation classes, did well in that, did earn the God and Country Award, which is interesting because the Boy Scouts God and Country Award for Roman Catholicism is called God and Country, but in Lutheran, it's called Pro Deo et Patria, which is Latin for God and country. So I thought that was a funny thing. I learned a little Latin there. But I had an interest in my own religious upbringing. I found that philosophy was depressing for me. Either I didn't get it or it just spun into negativity for me, sort of like Kierkegaard, kind of negative reading, not real uplifting stuff. However, Luther hit a nerve with me and interested in presenting him doing big works. And I mean, a musical would be a big work, board game would be a big work. Those are the two major events that have gone on in my brain, especially after earning Pro Deo et Patria award as a Boy Scout. Now, in business, I've avoided sex, politics, and religion as topics of conversation. They're the most interesting topics, but I've stayed away from them in business. I've stayed away from those topics in writing. In fact, a lot of my work with, talked to you about doing a planet hopping supplement. I try to remove conflict, and it becomes kind of a travelogue going from planet to planet to planet, unless there is some conflict with nature, conflict with the aliens, or psychological conflict between the members of the crew. Now, the psychological conflict between the members of the crew is definitely role playing, putting traps in their way, putting treasure hidden by the traps. I think the exploration alone is a storyline that could be used. We don't know what's around the next bend. We don't know what's on the next planet. I recently read that by the time our solar sun turns into a different kind of sun, we should be on Titan, because it will then be in the habitable zone of our sun for another 600,000 years. So if you're worried about human race surviving, I wouldn't worry too much. We seem to have survived so far.
The richest man in the world agrees with you. So I think it's a good idea as well. So you've been involved in the Lutheran Church your whole life then? Because I'm new to it. I grew up Southern Baptist and then played around with a few different ideas, but came back to Christianity. But it took until I moved to Florida, where there's a Lutheran congregation meeting in a Jews for Jesus synagogue right around the corner from me. And they had broken away from their mainline church because the mainline church decided to start incorporating praying to the four winds and to the earth and all these things that I don't think Martin Luther would have been into. So it's a great congregation for me. But what about yourself?
Well, while I was at Iowa State University, the born-again Christians wanted to rebaptize me because infant baptism wasn't good enough for them, which I declined. Also, the Moonies were active on campus trying to recruit people. They approached me, the meaning of life is joy. My argument was, so that's why Christ suffered and died on a cross, because it's joyful. No, it's not. Their bend was a little crooked to my religious upbringing. So Lutheranism also is a radical idea from an established religion. Roman Catholicism had been around for 1600 years, and suddenly an individual stands up and survives to say, this ain't right. We need to improve things. And his intention was to improve the status quo. But instead, the movement moved away from Catholicism and created something new that human spirit needed. Yes, there was a counter-reformation. Some of the countries, I think Poland, went Protestant and then went back to Catholicism. Europe, you might notice, has state religions. You even pay taxes that go to the state church. Then we had this new idea in America where we separate religion from politics. Gee, we're still here. People seem to like that concept and come here to find their way. Now, I'm no poster boy for Lutheranism. I'm just telling you it has fit with what I've been instructed and what I've observed. There are many Lutheran churches in Europe and in the United States. They can't quite get everybody into the same synod. It used to be language-based. You have a German Lutheran church and a Danish Lutheran church 5 miles apart, but that you'd only visit the other Lutherans if your neighbor died. You go to his funeral. So very separated by language until we were all speaking English following World War I, World War II. And then it became some synods joined other synods, and we still haven't got our act together because of the freedom of thought. There's people that don't think you should have women in the pulpit preaching. Well, they create their own group over there, and there are other beliefs, I should say political, within the church. I happen to be going a place that I believe in. In fact, we broke ground today for an expansion of our physical facility, and we feed people in our community. So it's a very important mission in my town. I just happen to be not comfortable telling other people, you need to believe what I believe. That's a little hard for me to do. In fact, I've been approached on college campus over the years, and people, yeah, I'm a real friendly guy, but I'm not going to tell you it's better if you believe my way. That's not how I was raised.
Well, there's at least a few things that are in your head that I think more people should believe, maybe related to religion, maybe not. But I've noticed that you and your lovely wife, Miss Jackie, y'all been together for a very long time, which I love. That's great. Those are goals because me and my wife, we've been together for 14 years, married for 9 of that. And, I just want to see that number keep getting bigger and bigger. And so whenever I see folks that have made it work for so long, I'm like, yeah, that's the goal, buddy. What have you two done to ensure that y'all stay together?
Well, in 3 days from now, we'll celebrate our 42nd wedding anniversary.
Woo!
I would have to say that this is the funny. Jack and I have had the discussion. She said, well, I thought you had potential. In other words, that was pretty obvious. She thought I had potential.
Mine told me that when we
Yeah.
got together, I was just out of the army and didn't have a job or nothing. Okay, potential.
And as long as I aspire to achieve, she's interested in me continuing to aspire to achieve. Now, we have a weekly date. We go out to a restaurant together and we talk to each other. We don't just compare our calendars to make sure we're at the same place at the same time, which is useful, but also, well, what are we doing together? Where will we be this week? What'll be, is there a problem we both need to work on? Is there that we talk to each other, which people don't always do that. We've enjoyed taking road trips and around the country. Either we'll take a road trip, which would be a big loop to get back home, or we'll go to a city, stay there, and go out every day from that city. One year we flew into Las Vegas and hit all the national and state parks, and then went back to Vegas and flew out. Did that once for San Diego, did that once for New Orleans, did that once for Green Bay, Wisconsin. That's one kind of trip. And the other is we go to a convention and we take off from there, keep driving, keep driving, keep driving, go back, finally get home. In fact, Doug Rhea of North Texas role-playing game invited us. We were up at Gamehole Con when he met us, and he said, why don't you make it a vacation? Come to the convention and make it a family vacation. And we went, well, since you're paying to put us up in a hotel and paying our gas to get here, and we didn't fly in by airplane, we have our own vehicle, we have then made vacations time together. I know a man who he and his wife take separate vacations, so they're not together. Well, Jackie and I take trips together to see Central Colorado or up there Seattle country, Washington State or Oregon, or
It's
we
so beautiful
go
up there.
we
Yeah.
go, we see, we took a 4-day drive down to Orlando, spent 5 days in the Mickey Land, and then drove 4 days back by a different route so we'd see some more of the country. When you are forced to be in a car with your loved one for 10 days, you need to get along. We'd like to travel. She wants to see the leaves change in Upper Peninsula, Michigan. It's a shorter distance than New England. I want to see Yosemite Valley in California. Our financial advisor tells us we can do both. So those are directions we're going in the future. Jackie doesn't want to take what do you call it, a ship. Doesn't want to travel by train. That means we're going to go by automobile and see the country.
There's a lot of freedom that way. You want to stop, you can stop. You want to go explore this, you can go explore this. You're tied to your schedule and how much gas you got in the tank. So I dig it. Well, that's cool, man. And congratulations on the upcoming 42. I love hearing that.
Well, thank you.
Yes, sir.
You were going to ask me about my employment. What would you like to know?
Yes, sir. So, from looking at your resume, you, for over 30 years, worked in various capacities for a convenience store chain with over 2,600 stores and 40,000 plus employees. I'm sorry to hear that you're not one of them because of the downsize that you mentioned earlier. But I find that game designers, they all are far more than just your life in the game. Because I think I saw Frank Mincer post that I had a career for 9 years in RPG work. That's it. That's all I've done. And so what's been happening in the rest of the life for Merle? So when I saw that career that you had, I wanted to ask you, what are some of the things that you learned from the career grind, challenges you faced, any valuable lessons you can share with us so we might listen and benefit from any of it?
Well, I was hired by a Midwest convenience store chain, but to get hired, interesting, the director of human resources took his teenage son to a game convention where I spoke, and it was Gary Kahn at Kenosha, Wisconsin. And I wowed the crowd with my clever repartee. That guy went back to Ankeny, Iowa. I was downsized, wound back in Ankeny, Iowa, wound up at the same church on the same committee, and he had spent several $1,000s creating a training video. And I said, do you need somebody to run the projector? I mean, I've got some audio-visual background. He said, are you looking? Sure, I'm always looking. Send me your resume. Send him a resume. They needed someone as a technical writer to compile the employee handbooks for the corporation. One book in one format for headquarter employees, another format for store employees. Now imagine, if you will, having written a role-playing game, an employee handbook is policies, procedures, and benefits with a table of contents and an index. Gee,
Kind of a
can you
role-playing
publish
game.
that in-house with our print shop? Yes. So for 2 years, and his son remained a big fan of role-playing games, especially Top Secret. Well, I was a technical writer in the human resources department for 2 years, which I parlayed into being the corporate communications manager for 2 years with internal communications. All the copy machines, fax machines, paper shredders, office supply, switchboard. I was the guy in charge of those departments, getting those things done. And then they needed a problem solver. Basically, I was responsible for collecting the make, model, and serial number of every non-electronic piece of equipment in all 2,600 stores. And I was the department head.
Wow.
So, point is, I talked about accuracy and completeness, I didn't deal with dollars, money, or people. I dealt with serial numbers. People would say, well, how old are our stores? Where are they at? Where's this piece of equipment? We want to replace it. It's obsolete. Are they? We need to pull them out and put new machines in. There's been a manufacturer's error. Where are these machines with the manufacturer's error located? And while I was doing that, so the first of 2 years, then 2 years, then another 31 years, added up to about 35 and a half years, I served on committees, an art committee decorating the building with art representing a Fortune 500 company, a newsletter committee. I was the editor of the company newsletter. It was published quarterly. A gift for the retiring CEO. He was a game player. We created Caseopoly, the board game. 10 copies for he and his friends with high-end materials, and then 19,000 copies for the public to buy through our 2,500 stores. Caseopoly, good luck. It's a collectible. Then I served on a compensation committee trying to decide what's fair pay for people within our buildings on the compensation committee. And my last committee work was a 50th anniversary celebration at headquarters. Company got to be 50 years old. Merle, could we have a celebration for employees here at headquarters? And you're in charge of it. Okay. Along the way, I also became the company archivist, collecting and preserving company history. So I had 2- and 3-dimensional archival items of the company's history, which we then stored and displayed within the buildings. Let's see.
You were all over the place.
Yeah, I was a problem solver for a corporation. So when they had an odd job, give it to Merle. And so I did a lot of odd jobs, everything from marketing to ghostwriting for executives to reading storybooks in a child development center. Merle was there because they needed somebody to do this odd thing. The most fun I had lately was they had a weekly conference call of 300 service employees, and the department heads would each give their report on Zoom, like you're doing. And now we'll hear from Merle with Casey's fun fact and bad dad joke. So 300 people on Tuesday mornings at 8 o'clock would tune in to hear their department heads' reports and Merle Rasmussen's bad jokes. So people started sending me bad jokes. And not only was the service department listening, human resources was listening, marketing was listening. A lot of departments were listening and putting my bad jokes up on the whiteboard in their department. I became known for my bad jokes, which are all had to be politically correct. They all had to
Sure,
be,
right,
you
yeah.
know, you can't have, I was a gatekeeper on the jokes. So that was the fun part. Plus, I've been told I have a face for radio. So
Oh,
my voice has helped
that's tough.
me. Also, there were a lot of employees that would not want to speak publicly. They do not want to be heard.
It's a
They
common
don't
fear.
have they don't have any speaking abilities. They may know how to run a forklift, run a big truck, whatever, make money,
A
but they
different
don't
skill
know.
set. Right.
Yes, a different skill set. I could speak for hours on the history of that company, and I have been asked to speak to civic groups on behalf of the company. What was funny is I could not speak about company money. I could speak about history, but not company money for obvious reasons. First of all, I didn't have the information.
Yeah,
And
you
if
weren't a money guy. In 2000, you went back for a bachelor's of arts. Why go back for a degree? Because
well,
it's the year 2000. You're already quite the adult learner at that point.
all of my siblings had their college degrees. My mother told people, oh, Merle just stopped out of college. And I had
Oh,
a CEO that informed me that, Merle, you need to finish. The company would not pay me to go to college, but they thought I should get a degree in business administration, the furthest thing from my interest. No interest in business administration.
yeah.
Did it for myself and discovered I was older than some of my teachers. That was fun, and had enough life experience that I could come to class dressed well and also knew how to write a resume. Some young people didn't know how to dress for success or write a resume.
It's
So
important.
yeah, it's important if you want to work in a real world. And I needed the intellectual challenge. I think that helped.
Well, I bet you were cooler than any of your instructors because how many of them are world famous espionage figures? Hmm? Not many.
Well,
I guarantee you, not many of them. Moving on to the standardized questions we've got at the end of the interview for everybody. I'm interested to hear your answers on these. First one, what's your favorite movie of all time? And if you can't do one, top three will do.
well, I came up with three, but my number one was Gandhi. I don't know if you're
Really?
familiar with
Okay.
that movie. Yes, Gandhi, I will stop and watch. Really enjoy the character, but Gandhi, the whole idea, is kind of resonates with me. So if you get an idea of Gandhi, the right
Ben
stuff.
Kingsley, right?
Yes, Ben Kingsley
Yeah,
played
that dude
Gandhi.
knows how to do it. Yeah. If you want a top shelf performance, motivate him. Yeah,
Uh,
perfect. That's the first time someone's mentioned that movie in these interviews, but why not?
I have odd tastes. The next one would be the right stuff. It'd be the Mercury 7 astronauts and surviving and going up in space and back appealed to me.
Do you think you can tease out like what on an emotional or primal or even intellectual level that finds that to be a tasty snack?
Well, one of my favorite scenes is they're about to launch the rocket, and the character portraying death is applauding before the rocket takes off. And I went, that's good. That is, yes, death is applauding. These guys are facing, 1 out of 4 times you go up in the rocket blows up and kills you. That's courage of a different kind. I think it's the courage, the unknown, what's out there. John Glenn is looking out of the space capsule and there's little sparks flying around his spacecraft. No explanation. We don't know what it is. It's still a mystery. Now, my thinking is it was pieces of atmosphere attached or detached from the capsule, but that's just my rational name. They didn't know what. So there's still the unknown factor. But I'd say the courage of ordinary people to do extraordinary things, I think that appealed to me a great deal.
That's good. I like
Yeah.
that because courage, that's a virtue that every age needs more of.
Well, if somebody told us we want you to go and homestead on the moon or on Mars, you and I would probably say, no, thank you. I'm not going because I have a comfortable life here. I'm not going to risk my life in the pursuit of science. I mean, that's a huge leap of faith,
Yeah.
if you like. And they survived. And the third one I came up with, I wanted to do a Clint Eastwood Western, couldn't come up with a name other than the spaghetti Westerns that he did. Deeply enjoyed those. Came up with 2001: A Space Odyssey. Saw it as a kid, couldn't believe what I was seeing, read the book, went, whoa, this is deep. This was far beyond my experience up to that point. 2001: A Space Odyssey got my attention. Uh,
Good.
so here you have two space movies and Gandhi, closely followed by a Clint Eastwood movie. Yeah, The Duke, John Wayne's pretty good too, but I think my vote goes to Clint Eastwood on his anti-hero movies, his spaghetti westerns.
So
Um,
not Top Secret with Val Kilmer?
no. In fact, I have avoided that film. Someone
It's
once asked me if that's what my game was about. No, no, it's not what it's about.
it's a fun movie. If you've never seen it, give it a whirl. I saw it in my collection and I thought, wait a second, that's the same name as his game. I should ask him about that. All right. So the next question we got. This is a literary film genre question. If you got shunted out of this reality, like Merle Rasmussen isn't in this world anymore, and you are who you are right now, and you get pushed into some world based on a specific movie, a movie genre, a book, a literary genre, which one would you pick to be shoved into and why? Now,
I
you have
am.
to live with all the cool parts and the bad parts.
I would be shuttled into 1815 to 1845 American West when the news traveled as fast as people before the telegraph was connecting every city, the steamboat era, the stagecoach era. This period I've been studying for years, collecting little stagecoaches, collecting steamboats, collecting postage stamps. Steamboats and stagecoaches got my attention. That's why I've traveled a lot of the Western United States. Both that era, pre-Civil War, and there was some post-Civil War, but pre-Civil War, before the telegraph, we were a big, big country. And there was a possibility, again, you had the courage, you had to leave the eastern United States back east and go to the far west. And that to me, again, showed courage, but it also showed determination. People would pack up all their belongings and walk behind the wagon all the way out, or as far as Salt Lake City or Oregon or California, take your pick. They
Yeah, it's
didn't,
still 1,000 miles,
yeah,
at
you had a
least.
1,000 mile, 1,500 mile walk,
Yeah,
civilization back on the Missouri River.
that is a long way to go on your Tootsies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you think it's boring driving across Nebraska today, imagine taking all day long to get from this horizon to that horizon. And that was one day. And we're going to do this for 3 months. You know, and there's a very good chance we will die on the way.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's Nebraska that you can't cross, even conservatively at 60 miles per hour. It's like 8 to 16 per day. It's a whole different life. So, as part of that era that interests you, the immediacy of what life is and a lack of distraction about, oh, this person on Twitter said this and this and that. It's being in the place where you are and the time that you are and just living with your environment. Does that play anything into what your thought process is?
Let me see if you're what you're asking me. Are you talking about living in the 1800s or you're living now? Tell me
The
what
1800s.
you're
Yeah.
asking. Yeah. I do think that we were on the verge of great times. There was someone who quit their job at the US Patent Office because he thought all the important things had already been invented. And this is before the phonograph, before the telephone, he quit his job just before this whole technological world came along. The automobile, the airplane. I took exception once. I was in a library science class, and the librarian said out loud, there is nothing new in the world. You have to document where you get your ideas. And I'm like going, excuse me, does this just blew me away that an educator would say there is nothing new in the world. Now, you don't tell Thomas Edison or Graham Bell or Walt Disney, or you don't tell these inventors there's nothing new. Yeah, television. So what? Uh, to be at the first side of it, where people were actually, we can do this. We can do a transatlantic cable. So the continents are connected and we can talk to each other.
Which still blows my mind that there's multiple cables that long
Yes.
that we rely on. That's crazy.
Yes. And oh yeah, we'll be able to put people in orbit around our planet. Oh, sure. Why would you do that? What possible use is there? And I'm being facetious on point on. All of the spin-off inventions, and I'm not just talking Tang, I'm talking all of the chemicals, all of the mechanical, electrical things that we learn. And as you know in science, a lot of science is finding out what doesn't work. You know,
Sure.
so we're in a parallel universe. I like to also talk about the fact that our internet is the 1400s printing press. In other words, movable type. Suddenly there was a blossoming of literature, the Reformation, the Counter-Reformation. Everybody was publishing. You can't print that. You can't say that. You can't, that it's illegal to have that. Da, 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 da. Boom, forward, 21st century. Ah, gee, we have the internet. You can't say that. You got to have that book. Take that book out of the schools. That's bad. You can't have those. Humans have now a new printing press, and we can all publish.
Yep.
Fascinating time to live in.
So you want to go back to kind of the American expansion period, and I'm assuming you want to be in the West.
West of the Missouri River.
That's also a very dangerous time. Are you ready for that? Are you ready to get in shootouts or face the elements without modern conveniences?
Well, I haven't been camping for 42 years. Uh, my gift in becoming an Eagle Scout was getting a backpack from my neighbors, which I've never used except for storage. So my wife is interested in glamping. Glamping if it was hermetically sealed so nothing could climb into the tent. The joke is Jackie thinks roughing it is staying at a motel without room service. So we yes,
I agree.
you applaud that. Well, first of all, most of the pioneers that had accidents with guns, they were shot by their own gun. They were farmers and they didn't know how to use firearms. And so the minute they saw a Native American, they thought it was hostile and they'd grab their gun and shoot themselves because they didn't know how to use the weapon, or they'd shoot a member of the family.
Weapons training is important, kids.
Yes, it is important. Now, I also know that an awful lot of people in those days died of terrible diseases, dysentery and cholera, etc. So obviously, I would hope not to contract any of the local diseases. However, once you're out and about and away from other humans, now you got to deal with nature. And I will tell you that Jackie and I love looking for moose. And we were once chased back to our car by a baby grizzly bear. That's about as close to nature as I want to get. We thought it was a full-size grizzly bear. He went splash, splash, splash across the stream. We ran to the car, which you're not supposed to run. We both jumped in, locked the doors, and then discovered the other person made it into the car with us. So you're
I didn't check first.
yes, self-preservation
Oh,
in before marriage. Just thought I'd let you know that. Uh, so, that was in Yellowstone National Park. And then the other story is we went hiking at the Glacier National Park, and we get out of the car and oh, this will be an easy hike. And we go to a sign that says you were in a grizzly bear area. And we get a little farther down the trail, you were in a mountain lion area. And then the the lack of oxygen kicked in, and we both cramped up and had to sit down because we were in such pain and lack of oxygen. Hypoxia.
hypoxia.
Okay. So we're dying. We're sitting on the trail. How are we going to get back to the car? And a guy comes walking down the trail with his toddler on top of his backpack, hiking, singing a song with his little boy on top, and we're going, we're going to die and be eaten by mountain lions and grizzly bears because we couldn't walk back to the car.
That's tough, dude. That's
And
tough.
the third story, Rocky Mountain National Park, and I'm looking down onto nice fluffy clouds, and I notice that there's lightning coming out of these clouds. They're nimbocumulus. It's a thunderstorm below me, and I am above the storm in a national park, and the storm is coming my way. So I start to run back to the car, and I remind myself, I don't have oxygen. I don't have oxygen here. Okay, so I'm bent over trying not to be hit by lightning while running out of oxygen, running to my car. So that's the high and low points of my camping career. And I was not struck by lightning. But the
Wow.
even the elk up there knew not to run around on top of the mountain.
Wow.
So,
See, I just spent 3.5 years in the army, and that cured me of any desire to want to sleep on the ground again. So
yes.
if my wife thinks she wants to go camping, but she hasn't done as much of it as I have. So I got the feeling that she doesn't really want to go camping, but I would go to a cabin, I would go to a motel, even a RV. That would be fine as long as I have a bed. But I don't feel like that has anything on your near death
Near
brushes.
death experiences.
I mean, I've fallen in a bunch of rivers, but I've been able to get out of them, not a problem. But that's different. Well, I'm glad
Thank
you
you.
lived.
Yes.
And I'm glad both you and Miss Jackie got in the car at the same time. So it wasn't one of you on the outside saying,
No.
let me in. So nobody has to say that, oh, yeah, I was totally going to leave you out there to die because it didn't come up. That's probably why your marriage has stayed together right there.
Well, we both realized here comes the baby grizzly bear, and he's lower than the window of the car. He had bluff charged us. But then it occurred to us, if he's the baby grizzly bear, where is Mama? And
Uh,
so at that point, we did everything wrong. We did everything wrong. It was every man for himself, and we laugh about it now. We once went out to see Custer's Last Stand. Battle of Greasy Grass out on the Crow Reservation, National Monument. And we get back in the car and start getting stung. And it's not mosquitoes, it's no-see-ums. They're miniature biting insects. Okay. Think gnat, half a
dang,
gnat. Okay. No-see-ums. And
that's
they're
tiny.
trapped in the car with us. So then we drove like to Billings, Montana, smashing their hands against the windows, trying to kill these invisible bugs, which I believe the Native Americans tried to tell Lewis and Clark there are spirits that live out here, and the wind blows them in your direction up against the mountainside, and they bite you. And I think they were describing no-see-ums. We experienced that trapped in our car with hundreds of these little insects, which we couldn't see bite us.
Oh, that sucks.
Wonderful. That's why I want to go back to that period of history where, yes,
It's like you've described every reason you wouldn't want to go back
but
there.
it was exciting. It was, you
Oh yeah,
learn,
death is usually exciting. Yeah.
you live, you learn, you anyway,
Oh,
you had
well,
other
Merle,
questions for me.
so it's been a great time talking to you, and thanks for surprising and delighting me in several different ways. So, if other people want to be surprised and delighted by you, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Well, I am on Facebook under Merle Rasmussen, no middle initial. And that's usually, I probably get two or three requests for friend a day. I usually look at their site to see if they're legit. I have had people copy me, try to make
Mm,
false sites about three times in my life.
dang.
And other people will try to sell me something. How you doing? How's your friendship? Whatever. And I'll say, how do you know this person? And what was the name of their business? And they never respond back.
No.
I get that. So usually I tell people Facebook. I do go to about three conventions a year. You can usually see me signing autographs there or stop me in the hallway and talk to me there. I don't think I'll give out my email address. I'm trying to save that for publishers.
Now, if anybody wants to contact Merle with a contractor job
oh,
offer,
well,
hit him in the Facebook first, then you get the rest of the doors open to you once he knows that you're for real.
well, you asked about being published. I wrote TSR. I have this idea for a game. They sent me a submissions letter, which I signed to send back because they were getting like two submissions a day at the time, most of them fantasy. Alan Hammock informed me mine was unique. Nobody come up with this espionage idea before. Send us a copy of your work. So I sent them a copy of my work. And they sent a letter back, and in the margin was written by Gary Gygax, accept this manuscript as soon as it is typed. So I had sent them a photocopy of my handwritten work. Well, then I went and hired three different typists that kept quitting on me. but they typed up my manuscript. I made a copy, sent that to TSR, and they responded with a royalty contract.
Was it
Now,
just too many words for them to type, or were you a jerk to deal with? Why did so many keep quitting on you?
one of the women quit on me because they usually make money typing people's dissertations. That's what they do on a college
Which
campus.
are lengthy, right?
Usually lengthy, technical writing, whatever. The one I remember that quit on me, she worked as a lab tech for the National Animal Disease Laboratory in Ames, Iowa, and she typed in her spare time. She said, "There is a duckbill infection, and I have to go to work. Somewhere in the nation, there was a duckbill infection, which may have sidelined the top secret manuscript." Uh, so
Oh, I hope the ducks were okay.
yes, I hope the ducks are okay, but she couldn't type the rest of my manuscript. She had to go do the other job, which I thought was highly amusing. Looking back on it, the game could have not been printed because of a duckbill infection. One person I went to see, no, I think they literally didn't know what they were typing. I think it might have frightened them a little because of the material that I was asking them to type.
And
Execution.
top secret, yeah, that
Yeah, I
makes
had a
sense.
whole page of execution types and um, lots of glossaries of international groups. And I can see where the average typist would go, I don't want to be associated with this any longer. So they'd quit on me.
That
And
makes a lot of sense now that you
I'd pay
explain it
them.
that way.
In those days, I made copies. They were a nickel a copy at the library. And so literally, I would plug nickels into the copy machine till it ran out of paper, till I had a copy of my manuscript to send to TSR. And then they proceeded to play test it for many years, probably from 1978 to 1980. They were play testing it. And finally, the game came out in February 1980. Well, by that time, I figured I had a written contract. I was going to be a world famous game designer. Why did I need a college education? So I found out that people in this world require you to have some education or experience. In fact, 2 years later, after the game was published, Alan Hammock hired me on the phone. And I got off the phone, and my brother said, "How much are they going to pay you? Why aren't your bags packed?" It's a dream job. So
Mhm.
I show up in Lake Geneva. Alan takes me in to see his supervisor. The guy's got my resume in front of him, and he's flipping it over and looking in the front and the back. And he said, "Well, Mr. Rasmussen, most of our game designers have either a degree in English or journalism, and you don't seem to have a degree in anything." And I was hemming and hawing. I didn't know how to respond to that. I thought I had a job. And Alan Hammock interrupts and says, "Well, sir, Mr. Rasmussen is the author of the espionage role-playing game Top Secret." So again, my experience, even as a young man, published at the age of 22, worked for TSR when I was 25, 26 years old, young man. I always joke about this. If you want to be invited to a game convention as a game designer, outlive your colleagues. That's a sure way to get invited. Plus, they're not producing as much anymore. So
Well, it
just
looks like you're doing a pretty good job of
a
outliving
word to
them
the wise there. Yeah.
at this point. Your next project that you're working on is a sequel to your Planets book that Frog God put out. And so, are there any other projects or things people should be looking for coming out of you in the future?
This is funny. We're on our third editor for Hacknoia, and colon Hacknoia, the game of conspiracy theories, the supernatural, and espionage. That's the full title. We're on our third editor, and they told me to stop writing after the first editor because they had enough material. Well, the third editor has informed me that they have shortened the characteristics, so to speak. I had too many, and they have play tested it at Gen Con, and it was a huge success, play testing. I've been playing a version for 3 or 4 years now at conventions, which I think you got to play in.
Mm-hmm.
So I would dare say that the next major work probably won't come out in hardback, probably come out in a soft cover. Will be called Hack Noia. It'll be coming out from Jolly Blackburn and Merle Rasmussen. He's going to be doing illustrations. I'm doing the rules. The editors just keep piling up.
What are y'all doing to these editors?
Yeah, well,
This is a recurring theme with you, man. Alan's like the only one that lasted.
And Alan was the best. He made my work better. That's what editors do. I throw tons of material out there and they cut through it to find the golden nugget, and it has to be playable. That's why the play testing. So now we're on 3 or 4 years of play testing. Jolly Blackburn and I, he's a huge fan of Top Secret. He spoofed my game in his comic strip. We shook hands on it, said, why don't we do this for real? It took the publisher and it took their lawyer a month to come up with a licensing agreement where every copy sold, Kenzer and Company would get a cut. And I said, that's fine with me, you know, put Jolly's name on it first. People know Jolly Blackburn. So Jolly Blackburn, Merle Rasmussen, we hope both our names are on it and they have a funny cover. But he is very, very humorous. What I was trying to do is comedy rules for espionage. He'd already done it on a comic strip, and it was very, very good. They sent me every copy of Hack Noia that appeared in the comic strip, and I stole his material to write the rules for that game. So I'm hoping, I wish it were available and I could tell you when it's available. It's been disappointing Christmas after Christmas that it's not yet available. And I appreciate your interviewing me. I just hope that you have enough material.
Oh, yeah, I got plenty. All right, Merle, I really enjoyed this. I appreciate your time and we wish you a great 42nd anniversary. Now, wasn't that interesting? I told you that was going to be interesting. And if you enjoyed this interview, again, I want to repeat that Shane Stacks did an interview with Merle that covers many topics we didn't cover in this one. It's well worth your time. I would recommend you check that out. I'll have a link in the description below. And my dear, dear friends, have you gamed with Merle? Have you ever played Top Secret or one of his Dungeons & Dragons games? Have you played one of his card games? Have you ever played Squirm? And what'd you think of this interview? Please drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read them all and I appreciate seeing them all, even the kind of schizo ones. I appreciate all of you out there. And so, my dear, dear friends, that's what we've got for now. And until next time, I wish you nothing but the best.
Yes, trying to look handsome.
Dapper as always. And as I've told you before, it was your sense of fashion that inspired me to wear suits. Nothing but during North Texas, which was apparently a really bad idea this year because it was so hot in there. Even the AC couldn't keep up with the heat outside. Oh, I was dying, dude. It was bad.
Welcome to that convention. I've had all kinds of weather there, but one year we found I brought all black clothes. And so we immediately went out to a t-shirt shop and bought something that wasn't black because we were in, I'll tell you how hot it was. Sweethearts will melt on your dashboard. I bet you didn't know sweethearts could melt.
They can. It's very hard to get them to, but they can.
We were amazed. That's hot. Welcome to Texas.
Yeah, welcome to Texas. We are in it. Yeah.
I promised you tuxedo, and then I went, you know, I'm a master of disguise. This is from my childhood. I love it.
Wow, you still have that?
Yes, and it's broken up on the inside.
Whatever.
And then, with your permission, I've worn the Top Secret Icon official coat. Yes.
Oh, of course.
And as we progress, I may or may not change costumes on you. Yes. Well, I laugh about it. I've got fluorescent light right above me, and then I've got 3 light bulbs in the background and a window to the outdoors. The hat, of course, goes with my yes, now you get the idea. Okay.
I like it.
I've got your your list of questions with
Oh,
my
word.
answers. And I've got a copy of my resume for quick reference in case I forget something. And I'm more
Well,
concerned about my appearance than anything else right now.